My husband insists I wear full makeup whenever we're intimate, and I'm not comfortable with it. Too scared for boyfriend to see me without makeup. Very embarrassing question. Am I the only one who's still terrified of my boyfriend seeing me without makeup? I've been with my boyfriend for 7 years. My beautiful sisters or my best friend, or most women I know in general, all look glowing without makeup. I wouldn't think, oh, she looks so weird without makeup, etc., ever about another person. I just see beauty and loveliness. But for me, I believe I look so starkly different without that I look ugly naturally. When I read these posts, it's hard not to get sad. Women all over the world of all ages are routinely fed the message that they are less beautiful and therefore less valuable in a barefaced state. For all my femme people out there, have you ever gone out, not wearing makeup, feeling decent about yourself, until people start to ask you things like, are you okay? You look tired. Are you feeling ill? Instant self-confidence killer. In a 1979 magazine issue, the media personality Dinah Rose said, "One of the many things men don't understand about women is the extent to which our self-esteem depends on how we feel we look at any given moment, and how much we yearn for a compliment at any age. If I had just won the Nobel Peace Prize but felt my hair looked awful, I would not be glowing with self-assurance when I entered the room." 40 years later, not much has changed. In the 2015 New York Times opinion piece titled "The Pressure to Look Good," Jennifer Weiner writes about the constant attention towards a woman's appearance, especially in the digital age. When Tina Fey shows off her Spanx on Letterman, how are you, lady writer, supposed to go on TV ungirdled? When the stylist who gave Kate Middleton those great post-delivery waves is praised in People magazine, how are you, brand new mom, supposed to leave the hospital with your own locks untended? When there are, conservatively speaking, 100,000 YouTube makeup tutorials, how can you leave the house looking anything less than flawless? Think of that recent viral shot of the Macedonian protester using the reflection from a police officer's riot shield to apply her lipstick. Yes, it was funny. Yes, she's a badass. But she's also a woman of her time, one who knows that being out in public means being looked at, and possibly photographed, assessed in a way that men still are not, and maybe never will be. When people tell us, beauty is on the inside, and then go get Botox, it's hard not to experience some cognitive dissonance. I have been repeatedly frustrated about the amount of times I've wasted trying to get my eyeliner to look even, or to even have to spend time doing my makeup at all. I could have slept an extra 40 minutes if I didn't feel the need to do makeup to go out. And that time seriously matters as a university student working multiple jobs. When I did my makeup routine in my Q&A video, I can't lie, I was nervous about putting my bare, makeupless face on the internet. Because when Sneeko watches your video in a live stream and says all women know how to do is look cute in front of a camera, that sticks with you. But at the same time, many people online have a resistance towards labeling makeup as oppressive. When we see a cool makeup look, it truly is an art form, and often it's a mix of artistic and scientific knowledge. Just as how a painter knows how to use shadows and highlights and colors to make something beautiful, so does the makeup artist. They also know which ingredients last longer together and which don't, what the optimal order of product is to get an indestructible base. Makeup seems awesome here. I remember a while ago now seeing this trending video of a woman on a podcast talking about how makeup is oppressive, and she was flamed by comments and reactions calling her a pick-me.
This is probably not going to be relatable at all, but I am so immensely, ferociously, unexplainably anti-makeup. And yes, I'm wearing mascara.
I'm against makeup. Makeup is capitalizing on women's insecurities when it's something that they can easily fix.
But I think it's also like a really good outlet for artistic people to like kind of showcase their art.
I agree, but how many people are actually using makeup to showcase their art rather than hide an insecurity?
That's also true.
The thought seems to be, what's so wrong with makeup? I enjoy makeup, I do it for myself, makeup is about self-expression, it gives us confidence, which if this is true for you, amazing, so happy for you. But for others, like myself, the comments the woman made in the video may not feel far off. Makeup may be something that feels restricting rather than liberating. After all, if makeup was purely a tool of self-expression and identity formation, why are people worried about 10-year-olds at Sephora buying Tarte concealer and Fenty contour sticks? Why care about the kids doing full-faced get-ready-for-me's to elementary school? In this 1997 study, which interviewed women as to why they wore makeup to work, the respondents felt that women who do not not wear makeup do not appear to be 1. Healthy, 2. Heterosexual, or 3. Credible. So what is the harm happening here? This video is ultimately about navigating this paradox of makeup. How can something feel so essential to identity formation and self-confidence, yet also cause insecurity and oppression? A few disclaimers before we move on. When me and others ask the question, is makeup oppressive? The question is a bit misleading, but it's catchier and easier to say. But an inanimate object like my eyeliner or my eyeshadow cannot actually do any oppressing. Rather, it is about why and how people use makeup and the dynamics that mediate makeup usage. In other words, is makeup a tool of oppression? And if yes, can makeup ever exist separately from oppression? Spoiler alert, I'm going to be arguing yes to both questions. Makeup is a tool of oppression, but that doesn't mean people aren't using makeup in ways that combat its oppressive context. This is an important clarification to make because to say it's the makeup itself that's oppressive, like this thing right here, seems to be a cop-out. It lets people say, oh, just stop wearing makeup and you'll be free. They can put the blame on the individual who buys this oppressive product. It's your fault for being insecure and reliant on concealer. By narrowly thinking of oppression as existing between objects and individuals, it misses all of the context around it. Because what's a girl gonna do when she does ditch her eyeliner and concealer? She goes, oh, naturel, only to hear comments from men like the ones mentioned in this Reddit post. If you aren't pretty without makeup, you aren't pretty. And 90% of the time, a comment on Reddit like this is not some super progressive guy trying to say, and if you aren't pretty, who cares? Attractiveness should not define you. Most of the time, the implied message is that you better have won the genetic white, cis, able-bodied lottery that aligns with societal beauty standards, or else you are a less valuable woman. As we'll see in the history of makeup, this thought process comes from a long history of makeup being seen as deceptive and immoral. Second disclaimer, this video is not going to be giving one universal answer to how oppressive makeup is. Everyone has a unique relationship with makeup dependent on their social identity and their personal history. I spoke with Dr. Kate Main, a philosophy professor at Cornell University, for this video, who you'll hear from in other parts, and she's here to echo this sentiment.
We need to be careful about universalizing here. So it's a really common impulse that philosophers have to try to universalize from our own experience or from the experience of people who have similar kinds of relationships to technologies and tools that we're talking about here. I think there are people for whom makeup really is self-expression, and I think people have very different relationships with it. I mean, someone who really enjoys playing with color palettes or who wants to do something that like feels to them dramatic or unexpected or artistic, like that's obviously a very different thing than this example I'm using of wanting your eyebrows to look like a little bit more just neat and tidy and professional.
Though I try to be inclusive, I will miss some perspectives because I only have my lived experience. For instance, I am aware of the shortage of queer, disabled, and non-American perspectives in this video. I tried to reach out to a bunch of interviewees, but my inbox came back pretty empty. So please feel free to educate me and others in the comments below. Lastly, this video is a philosophical and historical analysis, not a moral superiority thing. I'm wearing makeup, so clearly I'm not going to say anyone is a failing feminist for also using makeup. I myself struggle with feelings of being a hypocrite. I know makeup's role in a racist, patriarchal, fat-phobic industry, but I still feel compelled to wear it. I have gotten a lot more comfortable with my bare face in the past years, but it's still something that I'm working on. Lucky news for me though, and anyone else feels like a hypocrite, that is just how oppression works. The defining feature of oppression is that no matter what you do, you will face some negative effect.
When you're a member of an oppressed group and you're in an oppressive double bind, no matter what you do in the choice situation, you're going to end up to some degree reinforcing your own oppression.
This is Dr. Sukaina Hirji, who wrote this paper called Oppressive Double Binds. When I read her paper, I found it to be an important expansion on Marilyn Frye's famous definition of oppression from 1983. If we're going to explore whether makeup is a tool of oppression or not, not, we better get clear on what oppression is.
Free our sisters! Free ourselves! Free our sisters! Free ourselves! What do we want? Equal pay!
There are many things in life that cause us hardship and suffering, but Marilyn Frye recognizes that hardship and suffering are not synonymous with oppression. I can suffer a really bad injury, but that's not a sign of being oppressed. I can also take pleasure in things that oppress me, and in fact, that seems to be when oppression is most pernicious, when we don't even realize it.
Why don't you like it?
I'd rather be the way I am. I like to be out of my husband's thumb.
While bad feelings tend to accompany many experiences of oppression, oppression is defined by how our autonomy is limited by structurally related barriers that benefit some at the expense of others. Oppression creates a distinct kind of dilemma.
Part of how oppression works, I think, is to kind of co-opt our agency in the service of oppression. If you're a member of an oppressed group, your own sort of like prudential goods, so your ability to kind of like succeed or survive or flourish in the system, is kind of bound up with your resistance to oppression. So there's no sort of easy way to separate your resisting oppression from your ability to kind of survive or succeed or have access to certain kinds of prudential goods. In order to get access to those goods, you have to kind of cooperate within the oppressive system. But by doing that, you're kind of reinforcing the system that's controlling your access to these goods. But then on the flip side, if you try to resist the system, chances are you're going to face some kind of penalty or punishment. And that's going to be a kind of setback to your ability to survive or succeed in the system. And I think that in itself is a kind of setback to the goal of resisting oppression. So even in a circumstance where you're doing, you're acting with the goal of resisting your own oppression, I think there's also to some degree a way in which the kinds of costs or penalties that you're paying are kind of a way for the oppressive system to win to some degree.
So oppression puts people in a double bind. There is something necessarily self-undermining about the character of the choice available to an agent. Whatever they do, they are forced to act against themselves, becoming a mechanism in their own oppression. Due to oppression's systematic nature, it can only be observed if we zoom out to a big picture. Marilyn Frye compares the double bind of oppression to being stuck in a bird cage. From a microscopic viewpoint, it appears the bird can easily fly around each individual bar, but only a macroscopic viewpoint reveals how the interrelatedness of the bars leave no means to escape. No matter what the bird does, it's trapped in its cage.
It's not like there's some individual like forcing you to do a particular thing or manipulating you or threatening you into doing it. Often like this stuff is happening at the level of structures. Nobody actually needs to be telling us what to do or not to do. But there's a way in which, even though we're free to kind of make any of the choices that are available to us, the ways in which those choices are structured is kind of systematically limiting. Actually, it's a mistake to think that we should be so hard on ourselves or other people making these kinds of choices when the choices I think are really fraught and difficult. And instead, I think what we need to be doing is thinking about kind of building solidarity and sort of engaging in collective action.
So, does makeup put people in this double bind? Let's dive into a history of makeup to find out.
Her eyes are beautiful. She uses Maybelline.
And your eyes, too, can be beautiful when you use Maybelline.
In this section, I'm going to refer a lot to Hope in a Jar, written by Kathy Pice, a historian, which is an American history of makeup, so just keep that in mind. I highly recommend reading this book yourself if you're interested, because there is a lot of detail I won't cover in this video. Let's place ourselves in the shoes of society centuries ago. POV, it's the 1600s, and there is no such thing as makeup. Instead, it's called paint, because people who paint their faces are deceitful, sexually corrupt biatches. Be damned forever, you wretch! How dare you disobey God and change the face he created, and try to lure innocent men into your sexiness. When Darwinian evolutionary theory was popping off, Darwinians argued that makeup, aka paint, hindered evolutionary progress. Since men choose mates based on visual attraction, wearing makeup would mess up natural selection. Of course, if this is how it was for white women, it was even worse for black women in America. White women wearing paint was sinful, but they had the choice still of whether to wear it or not. And paint was made with white beauty in mind, meaning don't expect too much from the foundation range back then. People also used the fear and hatred of blackness to try to stop white women from using paint. An old etiquette book, for example, warned that the use of tinted lip salve gave the mouth a, quote, shriveled purplish look of a sick, derogatory term. Beauty was, and definitely continues to be, used as a symbol of social status, and the white women wanted to keep that hierarchy in place. Black slaves who would try to use beauty products would be severely punished. Delia Garlick, an enslaved woman, recalled being beat unconscious by her mistress for wearing some eyeshadow. Quote, "For this southern mistress, fashionability, including the use of beauty preparations, underscored the class and racial hierarchy of the plantation." Already, we can see makeup playing a paradoxical role for Black women and racial minorities in general. Using makeup challenged white supremacy's dehumanization of them, since they recognized the political significance of their appearance. Beautifying themselves was a claim towards being recognized as a human being, and, if relevant, a woman. However, Harriet Jacobs, who was herself enslaved and sexually abused, shared that physical beauty contained a cruel irony, for it inflamed white men's sexual abuse of Black women. Today, makeup sales are driven primarily by advertising, but the beginnings of makeup business were a lot different. When women who wanted to work were not allowed into almost every field of employment, some of them turned to selling beauty products. A good chunk of these women were racialized immigrant women, but since racialized immigrant women were not allowed to produce ads in the newspaper, they relied on local marketing strategies such as word of mouth, visiting people door to door, giving their customers advice in their salons. Businesswomen used popular narratives of womanhood, female bonding, and called their customers friends and sisters. Quote, "Reversing the Victorian logic that made appearance a function of character, they claimed that beautifying was a moral necessity that honored God's handiwork and nature's laws." Susanna Cockcroft, who wrote that beauty was a duty, urged, "Don't be ashamed of your desire for beauty." At the end of the 19th century, the term paint was replaced by makeup. This shift in language indicated that drawing and coloring our faces was not a costume-like cover-up. It's just a finishing touch to a woman's daily beauty routine. This leads to a beauty culture that still rings true today. There are never-ending improvements one can make to their appearance. For white wealthy women to expand their market, they focused on erasing social differences, even though they were obviously prominent. Black people were literally being lynched in public. Madame Yale, being one of those white businesswomen, once said, "Women may be divided into two classes, those who have a good complexion and those who do not." Quote, "In the female democracy of manufactured beauty, all could improve their looks, and those who did not only had themselves to blame. We love an apolitical queen." As makeup became more commercial and tried to be apolitical, unlike the white businesswomen, Black businesswomen paid extra attention to the politics of makeup and appearance. Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Turnbow Malone, two Black female entrepreneurs, refused to sell skin bleaches and never spoke of hair straightening as an aspect of their beauty systems. For marginalized communities, beauty culture was a chance to achieve personal dignity and collective advancement. They put the money earned from sales back into Black churches, Black schools, and communities and neighborhoods. Salons became a special place for Black women to bond and learn and share. In this woman-dominated culture, a lot of women started to use makeup because it was fun to experiment on themselves. They would buy makeup products based off of socializing with friends. There was sensory delight in different colors and smells. And doing makeup was also a private ritual just for themselves. Entering the 20th century, mass marketing comes along. RIP to all the businesswomen and their local marketing strategies. They were cooked the moment men were like,
"Wow, this makeup stuff is getting popular. All right, ladies, we can take it from here. Let's do mass production, mass distribution, market and advertise everywhere."
And all these women who were historically excluded from advertising and business ownership, especially racialized immigrant women, were kicked out from the sector. By the 1920s, cosmetic firms were led primarily by white men. Women lost ownership of the beauty industry. Now, of course, the 19th century businesswoman cared about profit, but the new mass market made profit more important than ever. The problem, though, most of the cosmetic companies sold the exact same product, same formulas and everything. So what did they do to stand out? They invented better products. I'm kidding. They just packaged them differently. Marketing was crucial. By 1930, women could choose from a bewildering array of 3,000 face powders and several hundred rouges. Another way to maximize profit and get women to buy more was to create false needs. In the 1920s and 1930s, manufacturers and consumers increasingly understood the face as a fashion piece. And fashion is constantly changing. So now that your face is a style that changes based on fashion trends, manufacturers had a convincing reason to introduce new products every season. Forget your old lipstick that still functions perfectly and is only half used. You need this new lipstick shade because your face will be outdated if you don't. Yay to feeling insecure every few months. These advertisers are smart as hell. They always seem to be one step ahead of us sheep consumers. See, they knew Americans loved their land of free individuals. So advertisers tied makeup to free individual self-expression, which is still a common way of thinking about makeup. There was the Armand Find Yourself campaign in 1929, which listed different aesthetic categories, or as kids today like to say, different cores. We have bloke core, ballet core, and cottage core. They had Cleopatra core, Cherie core, Mona Lisa core. Actually, those are more fashion related, so maybe the more accurate parallels are clean girl makeup, siren eyes, girl next door. I can't think of anything else, but there's tons. Aesthetic categories became more and more prominent in the 50s and 60s when the market was booming for the baby boomers. Brands started to associate themselves with certain types of women. Revlon was known as the brand of the sensual woman who only went out at night. CoverGirl deliberately marketed itself in opposition to Revlon as the daytime wholesome makeup so that teenagers could also use it. Because of America's diverse population, they also released face types, which turned ethnicities into aesthetics. Today, we've got the same thing, just repackaged with different words. Or we got people saying, I love Latina makeup, I love this style, I'm going to wear it, without knowing how it came from working class Latina women. Advice writer Helen McFadden once wrote, "It is quite possible here in the United States to join a Nordic skin to Italian hair and eyes, to color an English skin with a warmth of Spanish, Jewish, or Russian blood." Modern day translation of this would be like, it is quite possible here in the United States to look like the Kardashians, who have just mixed a bunch of ethnicities together so that you can't really tell where they come from. Even the names of theatrical music used ethnic signifiers, such as Stein's Mexicola Rouge. I don't think I have to explain much as to why reducing ethnicities to aesthetics that anyone can replicate through consumerism is problematic. Advertisers also drew upon another beloved American value, self-improvement to achieve the American dream. They started using psychology and therapy language to claim that a woman's external appearance is a direct reflection of their inner state. If a woman stopped trying new makeup, she was said to be destroying her inner potential to be different selves. Quote, "Those who are conscious of their poor appearance suffered from an inferiority complex," one psychiatrist judged, "but help was literally at hand," industry spokesman Everett McDonald promised, "for many a neurotic case has been cured with the deft application of a lipstick." In little more than a decade, an aesthetic of women's freedom and modernity had narrowed and turned in upon itself. Vogue could claim without irony that bright fingernails offered a minor adventure, and a facial doesn't stop at giving you a new face, it gives you a whole new point of view on life. What had once been seen as women's vices, vanity, deceit, desire, were now signs of a normal mind. Beauty manuals and women's magazines urged women to encourage narcissism in their daughters to make them care about their looks. The paradox of makeup is becoming more and more clear. Makeup began as a place of economic livelihood, individuality, and community for women. It gave women control over their identity, and especially for Black women, it let them feel dignified in a world that denied them humanity. But over time, makeup ended in binding feminine identity to manufactured beauty, self-portrayal to acts of consumption. You could not be perceived as properly feminine without buying makeup and adhering to racist patriarchal beauty standards. The spread of film and photography also made women more self-aware. They could spectate others' most intimate moments and then would begin to spectate themselves. Close-up photography gave the ability to expose new flaws. Men who once deemed makeup a horrible sin were now looking at women differently. They began to decide what was attractive based on film and media. They would pick partners based on their resemblance to a famous actress. When World War II rolled around, makeup consumption became even more crucial to preserving a feminine identity. As more women took on traditionally masculine jobs, they faced greater societal pressure to maintain traditional femininity through makeup.
Powder and lipstick are enough. Follow the natural shape of your lips.
For example, Tangy, which appeared in major women's magazines in 1943 and 1944, claimed that lipstick was essential during wartime. To wear lipstick was to successfully keep your femininity, even though you are doing man's work. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League during the war ordered the female athletes to take makeup lessons and to appear ladylike on the field. Psychiatrists expressed the importance of cosmetics in countering fatigue, improving morale, and increasing productivity. I can't find the exact quote in my notes now, but the cosmetics entrepreneur Helena Rubinstein said that there are no ugly women, only those who are lazy and those who put in effort. Well, I'd put in the effort, I guess, but I sure am not buying your products. Selling creams for $700 or $800? I'd rather be considered lazy. One of the respondents from this 1997 study I mentioned earlier, named Magda, said her husband interacts better with women whose appearance is pleasing to look at. She tells the story of them going out for dinner with a young woman that her husband had just hired for his company. Quote, "I told him she was fabulous. I said she's witty, she's intelligent, and she could do those things you don't want to do." He goes, "Yeah, but she doesn't try to maintain herself." And I said, "What do you mean? Does she fight? Is she aggressive?" He said, "Her appearance. Didn't you see how she was just so simple?" Then when Magda asks him, "Do you think women have to be pretty to be competent employees?" He says, "Magda, it has nothing to do with beauty. It has to do with just the effort they make to look good. It's the effort. Yeah, I know. She puts in tons of effort into the actual job tasks I give her, and she's highly intelligent and organized and all that, but come on, a little color on her cheeks wouldn't hurt anyone. Does this line of reasoning sound familiar to anyone? Just me? Okay. The cosmetics industry did try to sell to men as well, but makeup was so tied up with notions of femininity that the straighty men refused. Queer men were obviously a different story, but they had to engage with makeup discreetly, and they were not the target audience for these advertisers. Eventually, in the post-World War II era, advertising companies worked hard to create cosmetics that would reinforce masculine stereotypes so that men would buy them and still feel like real men. A big focus was convincing men that cosmetics actually enhanced their hetero sex appeal, which unfortunately came with harmful messages of domination. Quote, "In much of this marketing to men, the need to counter effeminacy turned romance into sexual aggression and violence. In television commercials, using clips from the James Bond movie Thunderball, an announcer intoned, 'When you use 007, be kind. Careful, it's loaded,' and license to kill women." The makeup industry and its marketing campaigns left a damaging impact on femme people's self-esteem, and they were sending contradictory messages. Using makeup was necessary to become feminine, but also we demand you use makeup to preserve the femininity that is already naturally there. This allowed makeup to become naturalized. Advertising was training the eye to perceive makeup as a natural feature of women's faces. Like, it will never not be funny when straight dudes say they prefer women who don't cake their faces with makeup, and they like their women natural, only to pull up a picture of a woman with a full face of makeup on. By the mid-60s, teenage girls who comprised 11% of the population bought nearly 1/4 of all cosmetics and beauty preparation. Makeup became an integral part of womanhood. Now, if you're wondering where the hell the critics of all this were, they were there, but they were mostly black women. So naturally, the criticism didn't make it mainstream. It was only until the end of the 1960s that the counterculture movement against makeup really took off. Quote, "The counterculture promoted an ideal of the natural body, evident in men growing long hair and beards and women rejecting makeup. The natural body was considered authentic, real, erotic, and beautiful, a challenge to the artifice and repression of post-war society."
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips?
Animated by the counterculture and the example of black women activists, young white feminists mounted an attack on beauty ideals and the beauty industry. Tellingly, the first public action of the women's liberation movement was a demonstration in 1968 against the Miss America beauty pageant. Protesting women's enslavement to commercial beauty standards, 100 feminists filled a trash can with makeup, curlers, hairspray, bras, and other beauty aids, and crowned a live sheep America's beauty queen. Second wave feminism heavily criticized makeup as a representation of harmful consumer culture and patriarchy. Bear with me because I'm about to read a long passage, but I'm a sucker for well-written prose. Dana Densmore, who was a math professor and an activist, wrote in her chapter on the temptation to be a beautiful object. Many of us are scarred by attempts as teenagers to win the promised glamour from cosmetics. How often the date sat below while the girl in anguish and despair, tinged with self-loathing, applies and wipes away the magical products that, despite their magic, are helpless against her horrifying plainness. Then, as we grew older and better looking, our faces more mature, and our handling of cosmetics more mature, there are times when nature and artifice combine to make us unquestionably beautiful for a moment. The incredible elation of looking in a mirror, the lighting just right, and seeing not the familiar, plain, troublesome self, but a beautiful object, worthy of worship. Then the lighting changes, or the evening wears on, and the face slips imperceptibly back into plainness, harshness. We must laugh louder because we must make up for the ugliness we suddenly found, or we crawl back into ourselves in an agony of humiliated self-consciousness. How can anyone take a mannequin seriously? I chose this passage because it highlights some of the common themes in second wave feminism's critique of the makeup industry. First, there's the use of concepts like object versus subject, which may be borrowing language from a post-Hegelian existentialism popping world. Simone de Beauvoir, a feminist existentialist, wrote about how women have been socialized to view their body not as an instrument of their radical freedom, but as an object destined for another. Knowing we are judged as objects, we view ourselves as objects. We become narcissistic. We now want to escape our radical freedom and freeze ourselves as a finished art project. For instance, the wrinkle creams, Botox, and powders are to stop the aging process, are ways for us to escape the scary fact that we are free and changing subjects. But that is inauthentic to Beauvoir and to many of those feminists. Secondly, there's a way in which the second wave feminist criticism sounds similar to Plato's criticism of art. Yeah, Plato, that ancient Greek guy. Plato thought that artists could only ever imitate an imitation of reality. For example, in the Platonic worldview, there is the abstract form of beauty. Then there is a physical flower, which is an imitation of that abstract form of beauty. And then there's the drawing of that flower, which is imitating an imitation. Similarly with makeup, some women activists have argued that to put makeup on, trying to replicate an image of some ideal beautiful woman, is to remove ourselves from reality. That picture of the flawless woman we see is already an imitation of real life. And now we are trying to copy that imitation with makeup. Feminist branches of philosophy also developed and criticized the makeup industry. Sandra Bartky put a feminist lens on Marxism and psychoanalysis to argue that sexual objectification was a form of gendered self-estrangement, just as how capitalist production produced self-estranged workers. On the one hand, the femme person is defined by her body, or her mere body parts, as the corn industry teaches us to do. On the other hand, she must always be removed from her body, thinking about how it is flawed, how it can be better. She must identify solely as her body or her body parts, and she must identify solely with her ideal potential body. This leads femme people to become infatuated with their physical flaws, to the point where we enjoy discussing our insecurities, how to improve them, spending tons of money and effort on fixing them. And if you don't admit your flaws, you might be shamed for it.
I hate my thighs. I'll take your thighs and raise you a chin.
I'll take your chin and raise you a...
What?
Oh, come on. I happen to love the way I look.
You should. You paid enough for it.
As such, the counterculture movement emphasized that aesthetics are political. People advocated for little to no makeup usage. As a black person, straightening your hair or dyeing it blonde, it was not just a personal style choice anymore. It was a political message. Malcolm X gave a speech about how straightening black hair was an alienation from one's blackness. But, as usual, the advertisers were smart. They saw this no makeup counterculture and responded accordingly. accordingly. Several brands changed their packaging to be plain and natural looking and hygienic. They focused their advertising on the scientific benefits of cosmetics. This is organic. Science shows that using this twice a day improves collagen production. So now when critics said the makeup industry objectifies us and exploits our insecurities, the industry could respond with, "No, sweetie, we're just doing objective science. We just want what's best for you." Today, I feel like similar themes of advertising persist, except now we have influencers to tell us the same things too. Makeup consumption has really skyrocketed in the 21st century. As someone who definitely does not have the highest self-confidence, criticizing the makeup industry comes naturally to me. Wearing no makeup until I was 16, and then still wearing very little of it until I was 18, gave me experiences that made me feel like I had to wear makeup to be valuable. It really hurt my self-esteem. Now, unfortunately, hurt self-esteem is not something I could get legal compensation for, but even if I could, traditional personal injury law firms have tons of paperwork, are time-consuming, and are really expensive. That's why the sponsor of today's video is Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, with over 1,000 attorneys operating in all 50 states. That means they have the resources to fight to get you the best results. Cause look, when you're seriously hurt, the way my self-esteem was, your injury could be worth millions. Unlike most insurance companies, Morgan & Morgan don't settle for lowball offers. They achieved significant verdicts in the past couple of months for victims involved in life-altering car accidents. $12 million in Florida, 34 times the highest insurance offer. $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. There are no upfront costs, no sign-up fees. Their service is absolutely free unless you win. All you have to do to submit the claim is to visit the link in my description and fill out this short form. Know how to protect your rights and take action. If you ever get seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you're only a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. It's so easy. If this is something you need, you can start your claim with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Ollie, found in the description, or by scanning the QR code on screen from your phone's camera. Alright, back to the video. Now, regardless of my personal relationship with makeup, I don't want to universalize from my individual experience. Lots of people feel differently. So now with our historical background, let's get into some analysis.
Makeup is very empowering. Women should celebrate this weapon in their arsenal. Women need to wear makeup to get ahead in life.
It's that women need to that makes me think, have we not progressed at all in the last 60 years?
Quick recap on oppression.
If you're a member of an oppressed group, your own sort of like prudential goods, so your ability to kind of like succeed or survive or flourish in the system, is kind of bound up with your resistance to oppression. So there's no sort of easy way to separate your resisting oppression from your ability to kind of survive or succeed or have access to certain kinds of prudential goods. The oppressive system is kind of controlling your access to certain sorts of goods like success or survival or aspects of your well-being. In order to get access to those goods, you have to kind of cooperate within the oppressive system. But by doing that, you're kind of reinforcing the system that's controlling your access to these goods.
I think makeup definitely seems to put a lot of people in a double bind. The problems with makeup happen at this structural level.
Look, you're entitled to do what you want with your body, it's yours. But I really worry that we're going to effectively feel obligated to do these things, which we shouldn't, because of big beauty, because of oppressive standards, and because of the sheer white supremacy and misogyny and ableism, transphobia, classism, etc. of it all.
For those who feel obligated to use makeup, whether that be to look like a certain beauty ideal, or to avoid social judgment, or to be seen as lovable, the desire to wear makeup is manufactured by oppressive structures, and fulfilling that desire is controlled by those same oppressive structures. So no matter what choice a femme person makes about makeup, any choice will undermine their flourishing in some way, whether big or small.
Every time we buy a product, especially the more expensive it is and the more often it needs replenishing, we are benefiting these incredibly lucrative corporations that are profiting off our collective insecurities. Is this particular idea that I have of myself, for example, as someone who always wears like a bold red lip, is that something that is really me, or is it something that I have been rewarded for.
Makeup is so tied up with patriarchy, capitalism, colorism, ableism, classism, so forth, that even those who genuinely choose to use makeup for self-expression or art may face negative consequences. If a woman or femme person decides to wear makeup in a way that aligns with standards of beauty, she does get the practical good of being recognized as properly feminine, or a real woman. She will probably be seen as desirable and a competent employee. However, she gives up the moral good of resisting those exclusionary beauty standards. If she does not wear makeup, or wears makeup in ways that are unconventional, she may be insulted or called an improper woman. She is treated as the exception that proves the rule about what women should look like. Kathy, a black woman, explains how she has to choose between excusing racism or sexism in the workplace. Quote, "I have always experienced racism in my life, and I'm more attuned to identify when someone is being racist, and I let the sexism pass. It's more offensive to me for you to be racist than to be sexist. So I do find that because I'm an African American, there are certain things that I need to do because I'm African American. And one of those things is to look professional and all the other good things. She feels she needs to use makeup to follow white standards of femininity to gain some racial justice. She's giving up one cause, being gender justice, for another. Whether a woman or femme person wears makeup or not, it seems to be self-undermining. Moreover, because of the societal context makeup exists in, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to separate the personal from the political. Can an Asian person with monolids like me use double eyelid tape without it signifying the European standard of having double eyelids? Can someone contour their nose to make it look smaller and pointier without it carrying some anti-Semitic baggage surrounding Jewish noses? Probably not. But at the same time, it also sucks not to be able to conform to these standards. We lose out on practical benefits and also chances at self-expression. Remember, there is no perfect choice in oppressive situations. Just because there is a negative political message that can be read from someone's makeup choice does not make them blameworthy. They are still entitled to make the style choices they want.
Self-presentation and what we're told we should look like are not always neatly separable. I mean, is the fact that someone wants to appear a certain way completely separable from what they've been told they should look like? No. But does that mean it's not an authentic expression of self? Not necessarily.
To say something is oppressive or that someone is aligning with oppressive standards is not to automatically shame the individual for the choice they made, because the core of oppression is not having a fully great choice available. I think with so many oppressive structures around us, we can all be more empathetic towards each other's choices. However, it's not all doomed. We can try to make better or worse choices. All choices under oppression undermine our resistance against oppression in some way, but the degree of the undermining can differ. When systems work against your flourishing, your very survival and success can be a net positive act of resistance. Take, for example, a trans woman who is faced with the choice of whether to use makeup or not. If she uses makeup to try to look feminine but doesn't pass as cis, she'll be seen as inauthentic or delusional. If she uses makeup to look feminine and does pass as cis, she gains practical goods, such as avoiding a lot of social punishment, getting jobs without worrying about transphobic employers. She can gain fame as conservative media's trophy wife. But she might also alienate herself from her own trans community, or legitimize the connection between traditional feminine appearance and womanhood. And if the trans woman doesn't care about using makeup to look feminine, she will be seen as her real gender. Quote, "Because there are multiple intersecting oppressive norms in operation, she does not have a simple choice between cooperation and resistance. There is a sense in which anything she does is a kind of resistance, insofar as simply being a trans woman is a form of resistance in a community that denies womanhood to trans women. Likewise, there is a sense in which anything she does, to some degree, amounts to a kind of cooperation with an oppressive norm."
For me, in making the kind of choice between how much do I want to sort of take certain kinds of penalties or costs if there's some meaningful resistance possible, I think actually I have a responsibility to kind of like lean more towards the resistance side. So I think about like, the decision of a trans woman in a very transphobic society, whether she should try and pass as cis. And that's the kind of situation where if, your life is at stake or your bodily security is at stake, I just think there are very, very strong reasons for you to opt for the prudentially most safe or secure option. And I think it's actually a mistake to think in that situation that what the person should do is kind of choose the resistance option, because again, part of what I want to argue in the paper is that division between resistance and what's prudentially best is not as neat or tidy as some philosophers have made it out.
I hope we're digesting the nuance here, so we can understand that, for example, when Dylan Mulvaney makes a song about girlhood involving traditionally feminine activities, doing her hair, wearing makeup, shopping, and retail therapy, there is no situation in which she could have pleased everyone.
Women just don't want to get out of bed, but fortunately they're able to pick up their meds to make them happy. I don't know what kind of meds we're picking up, but it's cool because by Wednesday we go shopping and we're back, and yay, we're very excited.
The internet gets mad at her for reducing womanhood in this song to superficial stereotypes, but what about girls just want to have fun? Last Friday night, 7 rings. When a trans woman tries to be hyper-feminine to meet your ideal of cis womanhood, she is shamed for never being able to truly know womanhood. She's just cosplaying. But when she was still learning about the norms of femininity and didn't pass as cis, she looked too masculine to be a woman. She was delusional. At this point, there shouldn't be a burden on trans women to ditch makeup and feminine norms the way cis feminists called for, because their existence itself is resistance.
It may come down in the end to questions about, is this really helping me flourish as the kind of social being I am in the world? Or is this something that's ultimately costing me more, both in terms of time and beauty labor, and in terms of sheer expense, than I'm willing to pay?
In Gerald Early's paper titled Life with Daughters, Watching the Miss America Pageant, he writes about how his family bonds over watching the Miss America pageant every year, even though he knows the pageant is a patriarchal wet dream in many ways. Yet when Miss Debbie Turner becomes the 3rd Black woman to win Miss America, him and his wife knew it was important for the Black community. Quote, "It is impossible for Blacks not to want to see their Black daughters elevated to the platforms where white women are." They understood that because appearance is political, succeeding even within a problematic beauty contest like this was positive. He puts it really well when he says that resisting oppression teaches us about transcending your degradation while learning to live in it and with it. So while resistance should absolutely focus on the oppressive structures themselves and not tear individuals apart, there are also ways that in the meantime, individuals can make strides towards dignity within those structures. While important decolonial work is being done on a structural level, many trans Latina activists are also paying attention to smaller acts, such as hosting transgender-led beauty pageants and practicing makeup artistry. As Brenda Del Rio Gonzalez, a trans activist and makeup artist, shares, "When we apply makeup, we are healing our shredded souls. They have been shred to pieces by life circumstances. We have lived a path of roses and thorns, and during that path, there are many roadblocks: HIV, substance abuse, immigration inequality, discrimination. All of those things destroy our integrity and our spirits. But like the clowns that are sad, and they paint their faces the same way we paint ourselves to cover our sadness. And then we begin to feel beautiful, and many more doors open up around us. We are now accepted back into society." Traditional feminine makeup has been reappropriated by queer folk in many ways to challenge that very same traditional femininity, rather than reinforce it. I would make a Judith Butler reference here, but I got too lazy to write it. It was like 3 a.m. So makeup has taken on such significant cultural meaning that it can become crucial to identity expression and community preservation for many people. Latina makeup, Chinese makeup, drag makeup, passing down these styles and learning the reasons behind why we wear bold lips or gradient lips is a preservation of culture. It is a sign of our right to flourish. Katie Pice writes about how, despite the racist origins of Black women straightening their hair, many Black women still look back on those times with fondness. Quote, "The smells of hair pressing, the movement of hands expertly applying oils and combs, the talk and laughter of Black women in the kitchen or the beauty parlor. No matter how nasty the makeup industry is, history has happened, and it has happened in a way in which representation now matters, for beauty is political. And beauty has been a special space of community and teaching for many femme persons. Makeup is a tool of oppression, yes, but so are many other things, and it doesn't always have to be one." I want to reiterate Dr. Kate Main's comment that everyone is entitled to their own stylistic choices, and it is wonderful for makeup to be a tool of self-expression. What's important is to oppose a world in which people feel obligated to wear makeup, to follow oppressive gender rules. I'll end the video off with this quote from Naomi Wolf from 1991. "It is often said that we must make fashion and advertising images include us, but this is a dangerously optimistic misunderstanding of how the market works. Advertising aimed at women works by lowering our self-esteem. If it flatters our self-esteem, it is not effective. Let's abandon this hope of looking to the index to fully include us. It won't, because if it does, it has lost its function." After this video, what do you think about this quote now? How do you agree or disagree with it? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. This was a complicated, messy video because the topic itself is full of paradox, but that's why it's important to have discussion about it. Thank you so much for watching, let's keep talking, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye!